Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing something a little bit different. You can notice I'm in a new setup. Expect to see this scenery more often. I've moved. But today we're going to be starting a conversation around the similarities and differences between two major world traditions, the ancient Greek and the ancient Indian epics. As a reminder, the Odyssey is probably one of the best well-known, this is probably the most known epic poem ever written by Homer. Also written by Homer is the Iliad. If you haven't had a chance to read these two, they are wonderful. The Odyssey centers around Odysseus' journey home back from the Trojan War and his quest to be reunited with his wife Penelope. And the Iliad is the story of the Trojan War, particularly of the rage of Achilles, who has lost Patroclus, one of his dear friends, and fights to avenge him. Now, I personally like the Iliad a little bit more than the Odyssey. I find Hector, the main prince of Troy, to be the most compelling character in the story. Now, why I wanted to talk about this subject is because recently I've been getting interested in Indian mythology, Vedic literature connected to the Hindu religion. What got me interested in this topic was my partner was getting into yoga, and so I wanted to understand some of the philosophical underpinnings of yoga. And so one of the ways that these topics are understood are actually through the epic tales that are told about certain key figures or heroes. So the first book that I read, typically the starting point for this type of reading, was the Bhagavad Gita. This is actually an excerpt or a chapter from a larger work, that larger work being the Mahabharata. And so this is a story of, as far as I am aware, because I haven't read it yet, a civil war or a dispute between two sides of the family. And so fundamentally, it's a story of war. Now, what I have been reading, I've gotten a couple chapters in, is the Ramayana, which is the story of Rama, the main figure and protagonist, who, at least so far in the story that I've read, has just been exiled away from his home. This is a good point to mention. I haven't read these texts all the way through. I'm kind of excited. The full texts are incredibly long. I read somewhere that the full Mahabharata, it's 12 times as long as the Iliad and the Odyssey put together. Now, if we look at our Iliad and the Odyssey, that's a lot of pages. That's a lot. I don't have the time or energy to get through the whole Mahabharata, and I don't think most people do. I've only found it in shortened works or abridged works. So, as I was saying, the Mahabharata and the Iliad to me seemed comparable as both stories of war, and the Ramayana and Odyssey, at least so far, seem to be kind of similar in the sense that they are about a journey of an individual hero. Another thing that I started to realize when I got into this, I've kind of already alluded to it by saying how long these texts are in full, is that unlike Greek mythology, which has crystallized, essentially, the Indian epics are still fluid, meaning that people, depending on the selections that they choose, can expand or eliminate certain parts to fit their narrative needs, to fit their likings, or the message they're trying to convey. In the ancient Hellenistic times, in the city of Alexandria, basically ancient librarians, grammarians, set down what we would consider today the authoritative versions of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Before that, the Iliad and the Odyssey were shared as oral poems by bards and traveling singers who would tell these tales. And you've got to imagine that sometimes these stories would change or adapt depending on the situations in which they were told. That's what the ancient epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, still do today. Of course, the texts that I have, right, are one version, right? But as in as like what the introduction to the Ramayana said, there is no one Ramayana. There are many Ramayanas. That's super cool because as it stands, there is only one Iliad and there is only one Odyssey. You do get differences in translations, right? The ones that I have are Fagle's Odyssey or Iliad, but that's not the same as Fagle's deciding to like leave out like oh my god, the say book 2 of the Iliad, which is the catalog of ships, which is like every single ship that showed up onto the shores of Troy. It's very tedious to read, but people don't leave it out. So maybe it's important to point out that there are some linguistic similarities between the epics of Greece and India. Both Greek and Sanskrit belong to the Indo-European language family, and so you can kind of think of them as language cousins. There are some words that are very similar in both languages, and so there is some shared tradition in terms of writing and language there. Based on what I've been reading, I would imagine that there are also some themes that are shared between the two stories. There were fundamental shared experiences that humans in different parts of the world struggled with and turned to their written literature to help figure out what was best. And this is something that we can still do today. Now, many of us won't be riding in chariots into battle, like in the Bhagavad Gita or the Iliad, but we may have these challenges to face between our obligations to our partners and our parents, or to our friends. These are kind of more relationship fundamentals that still apply today, even as they did thousands of years ago, because people are still people. Thanks for sticking around watching this video. If you liked it, just go ahead and drop a like and subscribe, and peace.